80% of the women who are migrating up this way are being raped. 80%.
The end of Title 42 is creating a desperate situation at the border, putting thousands of women and children in harm's way. A House Foreign Affairs subcommittee heard from a panel of human trafficking survivors and organizational leaders as they reviewed the implementation of the Victims in Trafficking and Violence Protection Act of 2000. Representative Rich McCormick says he's worried about Biden's policies like ending Title 42 that have unintended consequences and actually encourage the problem.
In government, what I'm worried about is we're not doing the right things to prevent these horrible things. Nobody can doubt that if 85,000 children disappear and 100,000 kids are being raped on the way up here, by the way, if 100,000 people are already used to being raped and then 85,000 disappear, what have we caused because of our lack of prevention or because of harmful legislation?
The precarious situation that Title 42's end has laid the United States' front door right now is shedding light on the worldwide epidemic of sex trafficking that has hidden in the shadows for years. Here's One America's Bridget Bosco.
More than 20 years ago, a historic bill became law, named the Trafficking Victims Protection Act of 2000, making human trafficking a federal crime in the United States. More importantly, this bill established dozens of programs to protect the victims, prosecute the perpetrators, and prevent trafficking from occurring in the first place. These strategic pillars became known to those involved in the fight as the 3 Ps. The landmark bill has been reauthorized 3 times. But as hard as it is to believe, it's been met with a great wall of opposition every time reauthorization rolls around. A dilemma not helped by special interest groups like the abortion lobby, pushing for their agendas to be included in the bill's provisions. Depressingly, lawmakers and the media have dismissed human trafficking, thinking those who are trying to bring awareness to the problem are exaggerating, and many only associating trafficking with guns and weapons, not human beings. That literally millions of women and children are being reduced to commodities for sale is just too unbelievable for most people to grasp. But the boots on the ground, organizations like Operation Underground Railroad, witness firsthand how rampant slavery still is in the modern world and in our nation.
There's more people enslaved today than ever before in the history of the world, which is shocking to people because they think their textbooks tell them that it ended with Abraham Lincoln and the end of the transatlantic slave trade. It's like, no, it's reared its ugly head again, and there's more people now than ever. Slave labor, sex, and organ harvesting, which is becoming a bigger thing, believe it or not.
The Trafficking Victims Protection Act, or TPVA, also established an interagency task force to monitor the pedophiles, perverts, and smugglers. Its success over the past 2 decades is something that the bill's author, Representative Chris Smith, praised at a House Foreign Affairs subcommittee hearing.
Thanks to the act, thousands of human traffickers have been prosecuted and jailed. Jeffrey Epstein was being prosecuted pursuant to the TVPA. He never got, obviously, to the point where the trial took place, but the indicting charges were all TPVA.
In 1996, Megan's Law was enacted to protect minors from sex offenders here at home in the U.S. But the Foreign Affairs Committee listened to those in the field who recognized that sex trafficking was an American import-export commodity. So to get at the root of the problem, their reach had to become worldwide. In 2016, after passing the House 3 times in 8 years, the International Megan's Law was finally instituted, requiring foreign governments to be notified when an American registered as a pedophile travels to their country. It gave Operation Angel Watch authority and Hawkeyes all over the globe. The Angel Watch Center is a joint effort with the U.S. Customs and Border Protection and U.S. Marshals and led by ICE. These agencies use flight data, the National Sex Offender Registry, and publicly available state sex offender websites to identify and alert foreign law enforcement if predators are on their way to their country.
We know that child sex tourism is rampant. Men mostly go on these child sex tourism trips all over the world, to Bangkok, to South America, to Brazil, Mexico, and they rent a child, which is disgusting beyond words, and abuse that child. And Angel Watch, the Angel Watch program, is doing a tremendous job of noticing countries of destination of that pedophile who's traveling, or pedophiles. They often do it in groups, and there have been over 2,000 notifications. About half have led to the country saying, you're not coming in.
But to protect the sheep, you have to catch the wolf. And sometimes it takes a wolf to catch a wolf. So Homeland Security investigations use the latest technology to collect evidence and track perverts who sexually exploit children using the dark web, chat rooms, peer-to-peer trading, and other internet-based platforms. Since 2016, the AWC has made more than 10,000 notifications to foreign countries and provided notice to the Department of State for more than 3,500 passports that require a convicted sex offender endorsement. On Friday, May 12th, the Subcommittee on Global Health, Global Human Rights, and International Organizations held a hearing to discuss U.S. and international anti-trafficking efforts, including implementation of the Trafficking Victims Protection Act. The emotional testimony from outreach leaders and several sex trafficking survivors themselves showed that there is so much more than the heroic rescues and takedown of predators. As a victim, Gina Cavallo said her traffickers controlled her through physical abuse and forced drug addiction. They dominated her psychologically by instilling fear and isolation and fostering a sense of distrust for her family, friends, and especially for law enforcement.
I was afraid of being arrested, which in my case happened several times. In one case, I was raped by an officer and released back to my traffickers. Had there been a national hotline number at the time, I would have had a safe place to call that wasn't law enforcement, who I feared. Thankfully, today we have a national hotline number which allows victims to feel safe and access service, and most importantly, it's done through a trauma-informed manner.
Judge Robert Long was trafficked for 4 years, raped, tortured, and subjected to every other kind of abuse for another 13 years of his childhood. But he was able to climb out of the wreckage of his adolescence and eventually graduate law school and become a judge. He credits the people and resources available to him in his need, which he says can be furthered by the TVPA.
And all along I've had my God, who loves me, who forgives me, and who guides me to this very day, to this very moment. The bill before you contains provisions that can provide the resources and pathways for children, for youth, for young persons, for adults to find their own pathways to their own goals.
DVPA provides aftercare for victims, including survivor group therapy, which gave several victims on Friday's panel the courage to tell their painful stories and bring awareness to the epidemic of sex slavery.
Those who have survived trafficking, how they're living today, how they're able to tell their stories, is embodiment of the strength of the human will and human spirit. There, our collective experiences is also a tale of morality. It is a story for more than surviving, in my opinion. It is a story of power of evil and the human spirit's refusal to be dominated by evil.
All these measures have worked to largely fulfill the protection and prosecution pillars of the TVPA, but prevention is an area still lacking. And so that was exactly the focus of Friday's subcommittee hearing. One by One founder Becky Murray describes how a single solitary encounter while on a trip to Sierra Leone changed her life.
And on the trip, I met a little girl, a 9-year-old girl who was living on the streets, and I noticed she had no shoes. So with less than $1, I bought her a little pair of flip-flops, and she approached me and she said, "Should I wait in your bedroom?" That little girl had been so abused by both men and women that she presumed less than $1 meant that I now deserved her body. And that one moment changed my life. I decided in that moment, I'll give my whole life to this. Even if it's only ever for one child, I'll give my whole life to this because no child should go through that.
Murray started a world movement to address child trafficking and modern-day slavery in those most impoverished corners of the world. One by One's Dignity Project has reached over 30,000 girls across Africa and Asia, in ways most Americans couldn't even conceive of. Period poverty, for example, is a worldwide problem that affects millions of girls and women every day. It refers to the lack of menstrual products, sanitation facilities, leaving literally millions of girls vulnerable to exploitation and trafficking.
Girls missing school and missing critical educational time during their absence, and girls who miss school or the work due to their periods become far more vulnerable to the tactics of traffickers as a result.
Murray proposes that the most important question before every government should be, how do we prevent human trafficking from happening in the first place? As a medical worker, she believes prevention is better than cure. And the key to this is being aware of the types of vulnerabilities that are out there and to tackle those vulnerabilities before they become an issue. Because of the Dignity Project's efforts, they've seen attendance rates and high school completion rates rise significantly. But she believes her organization's impact pales in comparison to the potential for global change that could arise from a larger investment from the U.S. government.
Girls particularly are marginalised because of this, and so it leads them into different situations of abuse. You know, I've met girls that have been willing to sell their bodies just in order to get sanitary products. Now that for me is an area where every single one of us can make an impact that's so cheap, so easy, and yet makes a life difference to girls around the world.
Young women selling their bodies out of necessity is all too common for trafficking survivor Bella Huneke, who described the total state of desperation in which many young, vulnerable girls find themselves.
I don't know, many of you, I don't know your personal lives, but I'm sure you've been in situations where you're extremely desperate. And I don't know if you've been in situations where you're desperate for water, food, or you sleep on bare concrete, or that you wish an animal would walk by so you can kill it and eat it raw. I don't know if you've been in that situation, but in a total state of desperation, people, children, would do almost anything to survive life, to survive the next hour, not even the next day, to survive the next hour.
The key for Huneke is to empower women financially by educating them and giving them skills to earn for themselves before they reach that vulnerable state of desperation. One thing we have learned over the past few decades in this fight against human trafficking is that delaying laws and action is denial of the problem, and therefore complacency in aiding the exploitation of some of America's most vulnerable citizens. For One America News, I'm Bridget Bosco.